Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Saskatchewan Pulse Growers and BASF.
Gordon Bacon, CEO of Pulse Canada, joins us here on Real Agriculture. And Gordon, we've been hearing over the last several weeks now about this trade issue with India, a major customer of Canadian Pulses. Can you bring us up to speed on where things are at with this pulse export situation with India?
Sure, Kelvin. For more than 10 years, Canada has been required to fumigate pulses that are destined for India, but with a derogation provided by the Indian government, that wasn't required. India signaled that they were not going to renew this derogation of fumigation, which means that Canada would have to start fumigating before cargoes would be shipped to India. We've heard that before, but they've made it very clear that they do not plan to extend it. So as of the end of March, the policy that we've been operating on since 2004 doesn't exist anymore. So it's really changed our business with India right now because there's a lot of uncertainty as to what will happen, how this will be addressed, and there's still some things at play that we need some answers from the Indian government on before we'll be able to answer all of those questions.
Okay. When we talk about pulse markets, India often comes up because it is such a significant customer. Just for context, how important is India for our Canadian pea and lentil growers and other pulse crop producers as well?
Yeah, without a doubt, India is our biggest market. It's our biggest market for yellow peas. And in total pulses, it accounts for something like 37% of our exports. So it has been for many years our biggest market. And incidentally, India gets something like 50% of its total pulse imports from Canada. So we're India's biggest market, and India sees Canada as a very important market in filling, what for many years has been a deficit in Indian production, and we fill a big part of that import demand. So this is a problem for the industry right now because we have companies that have contracts, both container shipment and bulk shipment. We have passed the window where containers could be shipped from Canada and arrive in India before the end of March. We passed the window where we could get bulk cars from the country to the port, charter vessels, and have a vessel sail from Vancouver to India. So we're in a real state of limbo right now in terms of what we'll be able to do.
So does that mean shipments to India have stopped?
Yeah, there's some shipments that are en route, but in terms of new business, there is a real chill in the market right now because of this uncertainty, and there's still some things at play. I mean, first I want to emphasize that from a risk perspective, it is Government of Canada and the Canadian industry perspective that our pulses don't present a risk to Indian plant quarantine and Indian pest control concerns. We have a highly regulated system in terms of, commercial elevators cannot store grain that is infested with live insects. We, have a very solid record of showing that we don't have a live insect problem, in part because of the climate, in part because of the regulations that are in place. We've done the research to show that the stem and bulb nematode that India is concerned about is not present in Canadian pulse exports. There was some confusion for several years about we do have nematodes, but it's not the nematode that is of concern to India. And we are also, monitor the weeds of concern, the weed seeds of concern that may be found in shipments. And again, these don't align with the weed seeds of concern in India's plant quarantine regulations. So we start from the position that we're not presenting a risk to India, so we should not be required to have a derogation of fumigation. We should not be required to fumigate now because the plant quarantine concerns are real for all of us in every country in the world. But it has to match an importing country's requirements are based on weed seeds or insects, diseases that they don't have. And it has to match up with what the exporting country has in terms of diseases, weed seeds, and insects. And then the measures you put in place are really to address, both import and export realities. So we don't feel that there's an issue. And this is really the package of material that Canada has provided to India is taking a look at the concerns that India has and then looking at the potential for risk that Canada would provide in exports. And it's our view that we don't have the concerns that India has, or we don't have the pests present that India would be concerned about. So we're waiting for the Indian government to review this technical package and make a decision and get back to us. But India has made it clear that they do not plan to extend these derogations of fumigations that a few countries, including Canada and the U.S., have enjoyed for the last number of years.
Okay. Do you think it's still possible to change, that they will change their mind? Minister Macaulay is headed to India on a trade mission. I'm assuming this will be a priority issue for him. Is it? Are you optimistic, or do you think there's still is the door still open, I guess, to having this exemption extended?
Well, I think it would be different than an exemption extended, because what we're hoping for is that there is a review of the risks that we have and that Canada is deemed to be clear of any of these risks. And so it's really not an exemption. Canada would not be subjected to the same rules because we don't have the pests that India is concerned about. The end point would be the same, is that we would continue to be able to export to India without fumigating in Canada, without any requirement for fumigation when the cargo arrives. So yeah, I think there is reason to be optimistic because the science shows that we don't have those risks. And what we're doing is waiting for a departmental assessment in India and a political decision on that departmental assessment. And the Canadian government has asked India to do this analysis as quickly as possible, knowing that trade is already being impacted by this uncertainty in this area of what will we do regarding India's plant quarantine policies.
Do you know what the timeline is for that departmental assessment, and how does it relate to the March 31st deadline?
Yeah, well, we're already in trouble because we have equipment companies that are not allocating equipment to go to India because of the uncertainty. Companies are puzzled now as to what the course of action should be. They have contracts that say they have to deliver, but we don't know what will happen when the cargo arrives in India. Will we be declared, free from any concern, and will the cargoes be able to enter? We don't know that. We're hoping by early March that gets clarified so that this window of uncertainty can close quickly and we can get back to business as usual. But we're not really expecting an answer till perhaps around the 10th of March, which isn't soon enough for many of the companies that do have contracts with India. So it can't come soon enough, but we're hoping sometime in the first week or so of March that we do get some feedback from the government of India on this proposal that was put forward. When India signaled that they were no longer going to allow for derogation of fumigation, which means countries like Canada, the U.S. didn't have to fumigate before shipment. They said that they were open to look at kind of proposals from specific countries that take a look at the risk. So Canada and other countries as well took advantage of that opportunity. So now we're sitting and waiting for that assessment to be completed so we know what the policy framework that we'll operate in will be as quickly as possible, but to fill that uncertainty of what will have to happen for cargoes from Canada to enter to India on April 1st and after that date.
Okay. We haven't really discussed this yet, but it's kind of, I think, the elephant in the room on this issue, Gordon, and that's that the Indian government has also recently talked about boosting domestic production and set some targets for the next few years in terms of increasing domestic pulse production. Is this a technical or a non-technical trade barrier, something used to support the domestic pulse industry in India? Is that what this is being used as?
I couldn't possibly know what is behind all of India's actions. I do know that plant quarantine concerns are legitimate ones for every country. Canada has our own plant quarantine restrictions. So respect that perspective of plant quarantine being a real concern. And I think that we're hoping that using the same risk-based principles and science-based assessments will have acknowledgement from India that Canada does not present a risk to Indian agriculture and the Indian economy. So let's give the Indian authorities time to take a look at that, and we're optimistic that when science-based assessments are governing what will happen, then we're optimistic that Canada should be able to, resume exports without any issues. So I'm optimistic that we have done our homework, that we do have a good system in Canada and our track record shows it in terms of not being a risk for a shipment of live insect pests, that, we've done our research We've actually changed the way the world does analysis on nematode work to, shift it. Some work out of the University of Manitoba that shifted, how we assess using DNA of nematodes to assess them. So we've done a lot of work over the years looking for a long-term solution, recognizing that plant quarantine issues are legitimate, and hopefully now the science and the track record that we have in Canada will get us back on track to be able to export to India.
All right. Is somebody from Pulse Canada going with the federal delegation that's headed to India?
Yeah, I'll be going to India. The chair of the Pulse Canada board, Lee Moats, will also be there. The president of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency will also be there. And so the minister will be having ministerial meetings. The president of CFIA will be having high-level meetings. So, and of course, we'll be there because this is a concern both to the trade, but also, it's getting the time of year where planting decisions are going to be firmed up. And whether we have access to India, how that will impact the market is hugely important. So this is something of interest to farmers, interest to Canadian exporters. And I think, from a long-term food security perspective, while India has signaled that it wants to become self-sufficient, it has a long way to go to get to that point. They have rising population. They have declining per capita consumption of pulses. So self-sufficient at what level of pulse consumption is one of the questions that, maybe we'll get some clarity on when we're in India. But I think that for many years to come, India will continue to be a pulse importer. And I have no doubt that Canada will continue to be their major supplier.
All right. Well, safe travels, Gordon. Thanks for taking the time to join us, and we'll look forward to hearing what comes next, where this goes from here. As you say, a lot of pea and lentil acres set to go into the ground in just a couple months here.
Thanks, Kelvin.